Okay, so this is the Drupal usability meeting for October 3rd, 2017. And we're going to look at an issue to remove the special behavior of user 1, and then talk about proposal to use React for building Drupal's administrative UIs, and then we'll see what else comes up in the meantime. So, Christian, do you want to talk about the user 1 issue?
Yeah, sure. So let me give you a quick intro. So for basically all Drupal versions that I can remember, the first user account on the website has always been a little special. It has access to everything by default, and there's no way to turn that off. So it's a big issue for security checklists, because one of the questions is, does the system have a root account that has all access? People's only choice so far was to disable that account. And secondly, it results in poor code being written for core, because there are some checks in core right now that basically just check whether the user's ID is 1, which is bad practice because that doesn't really tell you anything. So I decided to play around with it and just remove user 1's special abilities. Turned out that immediately 20 to 30 tests broke in core. And when I looked at those tests, it appeared that all of them broke because they were actually running without knowing with user 1's special privileges. So they started breaking because they weren't actually testing with the right privileges, or they were actually written in such a way that they went green only because they so happened to have user 1 as their test user. I just fixed one today where a test leaked states between runs, and it still went green because user 1 can just see about anything, and the test was actually checking whether the test user can see stuff, and the answer was yes, because they happen to be testing with user 1. So ideally, we want to get rid of that. Now, obviously, there's an issue with that, because we can't just have a website that you cannot administer. So the fix I found was to use the admin role that is given to you when you use the standard install profile, but make sure that that role is always installed. So I moved it from the standard install profile to the user module. And then upon site install, we assigned that role to user 1. That basically means that when you install a new site, nothing changes. You still get user 1 with all access, but you can strip user 1 from that access by unassigning the admin role. And that is the big difference. User 1 is no longer special because their ID happens to be 1. They're special because they have an admin role, but you can remove that, and then it's just another account like any other account on the website. So I've also added an update hook that fixes this for existing websites, so that user 1 does get the admin role. But after that update, you're free to remove it. That's basically the whole issue in a nutshell. A big-ass nutshell, but still. Maybe I should also explain why I'm talking to you guys about this. It's basically because someone slapped on a needs usability review tag on that issue, and I'm trying to clear that one. I don't really know what I need to do for that, or what info you guys need from me to clear that tag.
So I think what Catch said when he tagged it for usability review was that the screenshots of the validation message and how the role checkboxes look on user ID 1 would be useful. So I guess the validation message is when the role assignment is validated, that it tries to ensure that you have at least one user with the admin role or something like that.
Yes, so...
Christian, do you happen to have a dev environment with the patch applied, or you could walk us through it? by chance?
I could quickly spin up a simply test in the background while I reply to who was it? Gabor just said.
Yeah.
So let me just spin up a simply test with that patch. So basically, what I want to mention here is that the initial goal for the issue was to then add special logic that disallows you from removing the admin role from the last user on the site, which goes against what the patch is actually trying to hold on, patch. What the patch is trying to achieve, because it's trying to achieve a system where you have the possibility of removing all super accounts, so to speak. So when they asked for screenshots, I provided them, but it's hard to see anything different because Drupal doesn't change. It's basically the same interface you get for all users with an ID of 2 and higher, where you can assign or unassign any role. Nothing changes. I did not touch any of that. I didn't build in any logic that disallows you to remove the admin role from the last user who has it, because the issue summary also stated that we should perhaps put up a documentation page that tells you how to restore the admin role to anyone should you by chance happen to remove it from the last person who had it. So that approach makes more sense, and I've already drafted a change request that tells you a little about it, but I would also like to create a documentation page which lists a database query for if you don't have any tools, but also a drush command and a Drupal console command, all with the same goal in mind, adding the admin role to any user. Meanwhile, I'm spinning up a simply test. I'm going through the last step, but are there any questions regarding what I just said? It's a long issue. I'm definitely aware of that. So shall I post a simply test link, or shall I share my screen to demo it?
If you can share a screen, that would be best.
How about you share your screen?
Okay, so let me share my desktop and switch to Firefox. So this is a simply test me with the patch applied. The patch also applies to 8.4, thank God, but it's written for 8.5. So if you go to my account right now, I'm user 1, and I go to edit, you'll see that Drupal now by default has the admin role. And if I wish to do so, I can unset it. I'm not going to do that right now, because then I can demo the rest of it, of the things. But, oh crap. If you go to people and you look at the roles, whereas the admin role used to ship with the standard profile and you could delete it, it now ships with the user module, and it behaves exactly like anonymous and authenticated, because it's now something that we must always be able to rely on, which is also a great thing, because now we know the exact ID of the role that we know will always be there, and can therefore restore using that drush or Drupal console command in case you locked the last person who had access out. So let me show you what happens when I go to people and edit myself and remove that role. Then that should just give me an access denied for the admin page. And now I'm user 1 and I can't do anything, which is exactly the goal of the whole issue, that user 1 can be turned into a regular alt account that can't do anything that an admin can't do. So I've essentially locked myself out of my own website, but that's intentional. That's basically it. Unless you want me to click around some more, but that might be difficult because I just threw away my keys. How do I? Oh, there.
So I think the answer then is that it doesn't need usability review because different than adding or removing a role in any other respect, right? The key difference is that I guess you can totally screw yourself if you haven't given any other roles administer users permissions and you remove that last admin role from the last user. But then the workaround for that is a documentation page, a Drupal console, or Drush command. I mean, we need all three, really.
Yeah.
Page to get people back up to speed on where they were. But it sounds
Yep.
like you've already accounted that.
Yes, so
quick.
Yeah, so the only thing I would need to do, so I already drafted a change request, but I haven't drafted a documentation page yet because I was waiting for this meeting for your approval, whether that was the right approach. But I also think that for now, I can write up how to restore it using Drush and Drupal console, but this could be a really cool command to actually contribute to Drush and Drupal console, something like drush space restore-user-1 or something, just to run all of the necessary commands in one go.
Although, if they have already a Drupal add role or something like that command, then it seems like we could just use that, and it maybe wouldn't need any special anything.
Yeah. I'm just saying, like, I can already document it using the existing ones, like the add role commands. But you know, if they would, like, I was just thinking, I'm not that well versed in Drupal console, so suppose it's like 2 or 3 commands that you need to execute in order to do it, then it would be nice to have a shortcut. But if there's no need for it, then obviously no one will care about it and contribute that if it's just a one-liner for all of the tools. I'm just putting it out there that, you know, if it turns out that we need multiple commands to get it done, it might be cool to just compress them into one. But if that's not required, then yay, one step less to take, right?
In the patch real quick there.
My concern is, like, if you will need a Drupal console or a Drush command to put back, let's say, the status or the permissions for the regular permissions of the user one, but you can remove the superpowers, let's say that way, from user one from an account just by clicking. I don't know if it makes sense just to that you are able to remove it by click, but you are not able to bring them back by clicking. Yeah. It's like it's gonna be like for other admins that could be admin on a website but are not coders or are not developers at all, but they want to give someone permission, like, I don't know if they need permission like user one, but removing it by click. I think that will be better than to have them both on Drupal console or on Drush, just to have the command to remove the user one superpowers.
I think if there's at least one user with admin permissions and we validate that like you cannot revoke the only remaining one single person to not be an admin anymore, then that helps.
But the whole idea is that we should be able to remove it because it's on security checklists that a system once set up should not have an account that can do just about anything. So So I get what you're saying. What I'm trying to say is that, well, it's easiest to restore the role using one of the tools like Drush or Drupal console. It's possible to restore the role using a simple SQL query because it's an entity reference table that you just need to insert something into. But we could potentially even include a script, but I'm just thinking security-wise. If we put a pre-built tool in Drupal, a special PHP file that you need to call, then that's just another potential security leak, and a big one too.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
How we handle this on, I think how we handle this, if someone has a website up and running, they could test this out to be sure. We do some in-UI validation to ensure that, for example, you don't hide content or system content page or a block. So like if you were to go to admin structure blocks and you tried to remove, I forget what it's called, system content or something like that, it will not let you. Because if you did that, you would immediately not be able to do anything else on your site. But we could put some validation like that here, where it's like, I'm sorry, if you remove this role from the no more users who can undo this change, so we're not going to let you do it. Except I think the argument against that is, unlike removing the system content block, which is like, well, you fucked up and you shouldn't have done that. This is more like you explicitly want to make this configuration change on their production websites and when they do this. Because most people are not going to explicitly remove an administrator role unless that's what they're trying to do. So
that's, part of.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think we need a special command in core to recover from this. I think just fine, because the amount of times it would come up are probably small. As opposed to like dinking around in your blocks page, you can very easily get yourself into a situation where you don't understand that system content is like the content on the page, including the page that lets you move the block back. But that is one approach if people think that it's likely users will get themselves into the situation. I think someone will accidentally remove the admin role from all accounts, but I'm not sure how other people feel.
And maybe to add to that, and to reassure everyone here, it's not possible to also delete the role and, as a result, instantly revoke everyone's admin permissions, because with the change that is brought by this patch, it will no longer be possible to delete that admin role. It's not something that you get with a certain install profile. It's a mandatory config file in the user module. So all code from this point on can also rely on the fact that next to authenticated and anonymous, there will always be an admin role.
And that's true of existing site installs as well. Like I saw there's an update function in the patch. So the update function will make sure that, because obviously for Drupal site installed prior to whenever this goes in, so say this goes in the 8.5 release, any Drupal install prior to that will have been, like, they may have made their own administrator role called admin instead of administrator, like, so this will ensure that there is a system administrator role that you can't remove. Is that correct?
Yeah, and the update is written in a clever way so that it looks whether you have a role with the same machine name, and if you do, it doesn't do anything except restore the admin powers to that role, and if you don't, then it will install it from the config. So it basically accounts for most, if not all, scenarios. But I need to touch wood here, or how do you say it? Just to, but yeah, it's even got a post-update test.
Yeah, the only situation I can think of not covered by that is that calls their admin account admin instead of administrator. I don't think the update would catch it then.
But that wouldn't matter, because you can have multiple roles. You can have multiple roles in D8 that have the admin switch on. It's just that once you do, the user interface no longer allows you to select just one. So they could live side by side just fine, and then people could choose to delete the one that they created themselves.
So if the patch updates based on the machine name, then it would be possible that if a site had an administrator role that they didn't intend to have super admin, that it would suddenly have super admin?
Let me quickly have a look. That's a good That is a good concern. So let me quickly have a look at the update hook I wrote. One second. The thing is, though, that if they had a role with the administrator machine name, then that would already be sort of tricky because it's also provided by the standard profile, but it would definitely be possible. So let me have a look. Where is my, here we go. So can I install it otherwise? So yeah, if they had an administrator role, hold on. Yeah, if they had an administrator role and its config name was user.role.administrator because it's provided by the user module as a user role, then it would turn that flag on. Yes, it would basically turn it into an admin role. That is correct.
Okay. That would definitely be good to inform people because I've worked on sites that ended up adjusting the administrator role to non-super admin and then ended up creating a super administrator role.
Mm-hmm.
So that would definitely be something to communicate clearly.
Yeah, that's a good call. I'll see that makes it into the change record, which is already drafted, but I'll update the change record to reflect that.
Yeah, I would give it a different name because that's a security issue. If we're just updating an existing role.
But is there any name that we can give it that might not collide with, I mean, there's so many installs, we can't really guess what name will not have been used by any websites in the world.
Well, and also, I don't think we should optimize for that. I think we should optimize for what makes sense for new installs from here on out. But
yeah, I agree.
We could, think of a name of Sparkly Pony Admin or something, but it's not like we want to do that, in the future.
That would make a nice trivia.
It does maybe
question.
mean that we want to make the update function a little bit more. Yeah, I don't know. Like, we could make it fire a Drupal set message and say, hey, we did the following to your admin account. If that's not what you want, then read this documentation page on how to, make it do something else. I'm not sure. But I think a lot of people just like completely dismiss those, so it's still a cover your ass kind of thing as opposed to actually helping people. So I'm not sure.
Although, I mean, I agree with the fact that it might open up extra permissions to someone who wasn't supposed to have them. That said, when you have a global site role called administrator, I think it's fair to assume that they already had quite some powers, because otherwise it may have as well been called content editor or publisher or something like that. So
well, here's one idea.
You can't be
so
sure.
If you're checking on a machine name, can you do an extra check to say if the machine name is administrator and they have every single box checked, then do the thing?
Can I jump in here?
Show a Drupal set message because you, for some reason, have not given them all the permissions.
Yeah, I think it makes sense.
In Drupal 8, it's no longer about selecting all of the boxes. If you want to do that, then you can just go to the config, to the configuration pages and say this role is admin, and then Drupal will check all of the boxes for you, even though they're not really checked. They don't give, the permission names aren't saved on the role in that case. It's an extra check in the access layer that says if role equals, if role arrow is admin. So we can't really check for that because unless they were sadomasochistic enough to manually check all of the checkboxes all the time, they probably set the isAdmin flag. And if they didn't set it, so the update hook in that case adds it back. But if they didn't set it, maybe the update hook shouldn't add it back. But then that would mean that it would strip user 1 of powers that it used to have before. Because the update hook is trying to get to a situation where everything is like it was, and then you can choose to change it. But if they already had an admin role and we decide not to upgrade their version of the admin role, then there's no way we can still restore user one. Unless we create a new role by exception for that single scenario called Sparkling Pony whatever, and assign that one to user one, and then give them a message saying, you may want to remove Sparkling Pony whatever, but we decided to create this role because we weren't sure what to do with your admin role.
Yeah, and we don't want that kind of division. Like, we want all sites to be in sync with one another, rather than like every site before January 1st of 2018 is like this, and everything after, like, we don't want to put that. So, okay.
Yeah, because yeah.
I want to try and wrap this up because we have another topic to get to. I guess most of the biggest concern I heard from this discussion is update logic on a site where the existing administrator role deliberately reduced permissions. Happens in that case. And so I think if the patch accounts for that, so one way to account for that, for example, is if you detect that the administrator role, machine name administrator, does not have all of the permissions checked, I'm assuming we can check for that somehow or whatever, then I'll call administrator old or something and move all the accounts to that and add the new administrator account and then add a message that says that we did that. It's expanded permissions, but we don't overwrite like.
Which is the goal, except for user one, but that's the goal, that user one will still have God mode after the update.
Sorry, so user one gets the new role that we're adding, but whoever else had, in the old configuration would get administrator legacy or administrator original or whatever we want to call it. That would be one way to handle that. And I think then UID1 still gets the same permissions they always had. And their role is called administrator, just administrator, because that's what we want to call it from here on out. And then sites with that condition. And again, if they've got an administrator role with all the boxes checked, then we can just do exactly what the logic is already doing. So that's not a problem. It would be for the situation Emily brought up where they have a role, the machine name is administrator, but it's given out to people that are really only content admins or something like that. So it has a reduced set of permissions. We would not want to suddenly jack them up. So I think as long as you migrated that role to some other role and gave it a name, obviously happened like that, then people could go, whoa, what's this weird administrator old role? And then they could look at the people with that role and then decide how they wanted to deal with it. Because it might be that, oh, I have all the boxes checked, I guess I forgot, so I'll just move it to this new role. Or it might be that they want to rename it to something more like content admin instead. That's fine. But I think that is probably the way to handle that.
Okay, cool. I can definitely pull that one off. Any objections to Sparkling Pony admin? Because we still have that precaution that we need to take to not have a machine name that people might have already used. I could just also like create a UUID looking machine name and run with that, but we could as well use Sparkling Pony admin or something.
No, Sparkling Pony admin was a dumb idea. It was just if we wanted to call this new role something very specific. I think administrator is the common name for what we would call this. So I think what you're doing is fine. I think we just need to account for existing sites.
Yeah, I'm talking about that.
Existing sites. And oh, sorry, go ahead.
I'm talking about that one. So when you want to move the admin role they created to something new, like you said old admin, that's fine for a label, but we still need a unique machine name and we still need to account for collisions in that case. So is it fine if I call the migrated role by machine name, like Sparkling Pony admin or something different, just to make sure that there's a small likelihood of people having that machine name.
Yeah, I think in that case, you'd rename it from like the old administrator, and then you'd rename administrator legacy or administrator old or administrator whatever, and then you'd make the new role.
Yeah, I agree. So it's just, I was concerned about the fact that for some weird reason, a site may already have an administrator underscore legacy machine name.
I mean, that would be like a 0.001% use case. I don't think we have to worry about that really.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to double check so that I don't write it in one way and then it gets set back to needs work because of that.
I mean, does anybody have concerns with administrator underscore legacy as a name? I literally don't care. Other than I think it should be self-descriptive, so not sparkling ponies.
I'm just thinking if it might cause problems with features. So if we have we have a new role with this administrator legacy, but we have still an administrator role, so that features module will see it as a change. And if you revert a feature, it will just override what you have.
This is an honest question. Does anyone still use features on Drupal 8 with, config import and export? Okay, yeah. I'm saying it's an honest question. I have no idea how features would deal with this because they override the config service, if I'm not mistaken.
I think it's just using it, not overriding, but I'm not sure. I'm not an expert on that field.
Features in D8 is basically a front-end configuration management system. Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, yes, I can.
Okay. But that's sort of red herring because in Drupal 8, perhaps the real question is, what happens if someone runs the update function and then their config changes and they're using config management to manage local dev stage and prod sites? How is this going to work when they update their prod site? So just change the word features to the word config management, and it's still a valid question.
That when you run any form of updates, regardless of whether you actually commit all of the core files or not, you should always run your workflow and then commit that. So you should update locally, commit any changes, and then push that up. So if you run the updates and that changes the config file, suppose you're just using config import and export, then it will be reflected in your sync folder on disk. So you have something you can commit. And if you then push that out, along with the new version in your composer file or whatever, it should pick that up just fine.
Yeah, but this can have a high security impact, so we shouldn't assume that people always following their own workflows and stuff, I guess.
So unless we want to cover config workflows as a UX meeting topic, we should move on to our next one.
Yeah, I think it's more like a security thing, so it needs more security review and security talk than UX.
Okay, so before we move on, who wants to summarize the feedback from this meeting in that issue? Wants to? Who's going to do that?
Well, I could do it, but I don't know if I'm the right person because I'm I could just tell people that I talked to you when I didn't. So True. It may have more credibility if someone other than me posted something in there.
All right. I can post a comment from a UX point of view. Was there any other concerns other than the existing situation where someone has an account and we want to make sure they don't get added more permissions? Was there any other concerns, usability, and making sure that documentation page exists? Were there any other concerns?
Other than that, I think no.
Okay. I'll write a comment to that effect then. And then I think the other issue that's being brought up here about features or CMI or whatever, I don't quite grok that, but definitely post an issue or a comment in that issue as well. The issue again is 540008. So definitely post an issue or a comment in that issue to cover that, because that like a usability problem, but it does seem like it could be a functionality problem. So. Cool. Thanks a lot.
All right. Thank you guys for listening. Yeah, I mean, that's basically all I needed, that, you know, you guys would discuss this. So do you still need me on the call, or I'm not sure how this works.
I don't think so. So if you want to hop off, that's totally fine. If you want to stick around and see what other people are talking about, that's fine too, either way. But thanks for joining us.
Yeah, it's 9:45 p.m. So if you don't mind, I'm going to join my wife on the sofa for about half an hour before we have to go to bed. So,
all right, sounds good.
But thank you guys for your time. Really appreciate it. All right. See ya. Bye.
So next topic. I think that you wanted to bring up the React discussion.
I suggested it, but Addix is not here, and there isn't a separate issue for that. So in the meantime, I guess Benji had a topic. So
yes, I have a pet issue.
That mine is a 15-minute topic. It might be a longer than 15-minute topic. So
I have a pet issue. I posted it in Slack. It has to do with what happens when you reuse an existing field. I'm not audible, am I?
Yeah, I can hear you.
You can hear me?
Yep.
Hello, hello?
Yep.
Okay. So when you reuse an existing field, not much of your configuration gets copied over. For example, if you've set a non-default widget, form widget for the field, that gets lost. And if you want to use the same widget on the new field is used, you have to enable that separately. View mode configuration, form mode configuration, none of that gets copied over. And this, in particular, causes problems if you're using the paragraphs module and you reuse a paragraphs field. So I have a patch and been working on it for a while, and I wonder if it falls within the interest of this group, and if so, then maybe I could get some feedback on how it should work.
Sure, if that's feedback on usability, sure. Absolutely.
I mean, I think if usability applies to site builders, then I think this counts.
Absolutely. I meant like we're not gonna review how whatever configuration is copied over or whatnot, or what's the API implementation or whatever. So do you have a demo of how would this work?
There's some screenshots further down the issue from DrupalCon Baltimore. So the second one shows how it works with the patch, where for...
so you have an option to reuse one with default settings and reuse one with the settings in an existing bundle. So if you have more bundles like page, etc., and they also use the same fields, then they would also show up as separate options.
Right.
So what's the use case in this setting to reuse them with default settings in the first place?
That's a good question. Sort of backwards compatibility. You know, if someone wants it to work the way it did before the patch, then I have to provide a default option.
Did someone speak up that they wanted to have that behavior?
I don't think I've run into anyone who said that.
At least to me, it looks odd that you have reuse existing field and then you say default settings, so it's not actually reusing some of the settings, but it's hard to tell which ones, right? So it's.
But it is using the same field storage, which is a very back-end way of answering the question.
I know.
And you know, there's of course the old XKCD point that any change you introduce breaks someone's workflow. So I just have this standard assumption that if I change anything, someone's going to complain about it. So I have to provide a way for it to work the way it did before. But if you want to consider removing the default option, that would not be hard to implement.
Yeah, it would be nice to know what people's use cases for that would be. And if we can like name it in some more concrete way that would explain what it actually does.
I guess some other questions that have come up are, one, instead of this grouping using opt groups, some people have suggested that I provide two select lists, and first you select the field, and then once that's selected, you have a separate list to select whether to use default or which of the existing content types have that field. Which sounds complicated to me. I don't really want to do that, but a couple of people have suggested it would be nice. And then the second question is, would it make more sense to have the list organized as it is now, where you first choose the field and then choose which bundle that implements the field you want to copy the settings from? Or would it make more sense first to choose the bundle and then to choose a field from that bundle? And I guess when I first started working on this, I brought the question to my local Drupal meetup, and they suggested that I do it the way it shows in this screenshot. First, you select the field. Although I've always thought it would make more sense to, first, from the site builder's point of view, first to select the bundle.
I think if it would be an isolated form field, I would agree. But because this field shows up side by side with the select a field type widget for adding a new field, where it's definitely grouped by field type, there's a expectation of similarity, maybe, that you have field types listed in both lists, although yeah, field types in both lists. Although you have existing fields here that are maybe various that have the same field type. So maybe that's not a good argument. For the separating these to two select fields or two widgets, I think the tricky thing there would be that we need to answer both questions, so you would not do either report an error or disable the save button or something before everything's selected. Usually report an error in Drupal. So you would still be able to hit the save button, and then you would get an error that, oh, you didn't select what kind of settings you want from that field. That may be more annoying, especially to existing users who are used to just picking the field and running with it.
Well, the other option is that if they haven't selected something from the bundle list, that they just get the default settings.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
which again would follow the principle of least change from the way it currently works.
So the default settings would be the default option in the next dropdown, second dropdown, or the third. Yeah, I don't know. Any feedback from others?
I was totally not paying attention because I was posting the comment from the last issue. So I don't know.
So summary is when you reuse an existing field. Currently, a lot of the field settings and display settings, etc., are not copied over, and that's a problem. It's not so you're not actually reusing the field as a whole with all of its settings. You just reuse the field storage, and this patch proposes a way to reuse all the settings, to copy over the settings to this bundle that you want to add the field to, and this is the proposed UI being shown.
Mm-hmm.
Does it help?
So I'm selecting existing field. It's not clear to me.
So here's the previous UI.
One is, what does default settings mean? Two is article mean the field tags assigned to the article content? Like, what I'd prefer to see here is, a human readable version of what we're actually talking about. So like default settings, and then in parentheses or in little gray text or whatever is like shared size 60, whatever, like, you know what I mean? Like, because I have no idea what the impact is of selecting any of these right now. Not what you wanted to hear, but that's
so I think there have actually been some changes since that screenshot was generated, and based on a suggestion later on, I think I made it article settings rather than just article.
Yeah, I mean that helps slightly, but
and it might also help to change the. It might also help to change the label of the select list instead of just saying reuse an existing field. Reuse a field from a bundle or.
No, we don't use bundle in user-facing text.
Yeah.
Again, it's like it would make more sense. What like the other way you could go about this is the completely other way, which is when I'm already looking at the field tags on an article bundle, there's a right, so I could like click the clone button so I know what I'm doing, like I'm cloning field tags, and then it's like where do you want to add this field, and then it would give me the options of put it on or something. But this existing UI just leaves me with a bunch of questions and no answers. Find out like what.
You will try to remember.
Is this the existing UI? Because even this UI is better in that it's showing me where I would find.
Yeah, so this is the existing UI in core right now. So it says like you want to reuse the field event date field or the field text field that's an entity reference or etc.
Yeah, but that's very straightforward. What if, could you go back to the new one? That's just so weird.
So the option group headers are the sort of the same.
Yeah, sort of the same.
And then they have some
I guess
options.
default settings, and then maybe the label is inherit settings from. It's still weird though, because I don't make the settings on article at all. I make the settings on field tags.
You clone from there, yeah. You clone from the field, the tags field as it is used on articles.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we want to say, except we don't want to use quite that many words. But,
yeah.
Right. I think if you scroll to the comment right below the, well, comment number 31. So what is default settings is the question.
Yeah.
And there's a suggestion there that I say default field type field settings.
It still doesn't tell me what that is, though. I mean, adding more words is still. I wouldn't know what default image field settings were without like a actual description.
Yeah, it's like whether it shows in the display or not, whether it shows in the form or not.
Yeah.
Like
what I'm thinking here is, you know how on a vertical tab, you know, it's like publishing options is the name of the vertical tab, and then below that it's like, yes, but it tells you what that actually is. That's what I'm kind of seeking here. Because then I could very easily see the difference between choosing default settings or choosing the inherit from article.
So we're almost out of time. So I guess I didn't get any strong opinions about whether to choose bundle first or whether to choose field first. And you agree that it has to be more descriptive about what you're getting when you choose an item from this list, that some serious thought has to be given to this interface text. And do you agree that it's a desirable feature to have?
Probably. It seems like if that's what you wanted, it would be really easy to forget to check a box where you previously checked a box or whatever. I couldn't say, like, I don't have a good handle on whether this is an 80% use case or a 10% use case or whatever. About bloating the drop down like that is you make it, you know, I think adding an existing field is already kind of a special edge case kind of thing usually. But you make
Really?
you push this feature in front of everyone who uses that means. So it's like every user who now adds an existing field is punched in the face with the fact that they have to make this choice about how they want to instantiate the settings.
I think if you use
sense, that might not make sense. I don't have a good handle on that.
You know, if I want to use taxonomy on my site, I'm going to be applying the same vocabulary to a bunch of different content types. And I'm going to want a taxonomy field on each one of those. And I'd like it to be, in some sense, the same taxonomy field. As it is now, when I reuse a taxonomy field, I don't even get the setting for which vocabulary it applies to, because that's
Right.
not one of the settings it copies over.
That seems like a useful thing to do, but we could fix that bug, like without exposing extra UI overhead to every single user for every single field. You know?
Oh, how would you fix it without the additional?
Well, if I'm adding an addition, just when I instantiate it, I would instantiate it with a vocabulary pre-selected based on the other field. Like a lot of
what do you mean
stuff
based on the other field? Based on which other field? Because it's also possible, and this is a real edge case, it's also possible to have the same field storage for taxonomy, but on one content type it refers to one vocabulary, and in another content type it refers to a second vocabulary.
People undo it if that's not what they want. But like in probably 90% of the cases, the field tags probably refers to the tag as checked. That's probably a bug you did not want. So what I'm saying is, like, if that's the impetus for this feature, we could fix that in a different way, which is preset the vocabulary if you're adding from an existing taxonomy field behind the scenes without a user having to think about it. Because the way here is you're forcing users to think about it every time they add an existing field. And it totally makes sense in the case of taxonomy terms to replicate all the existing settings, but may or may not make sense for others. Like, in other words, if we think that what people often want is to copy and paste these settings from the field that they're cloning, like, make that the default behavior, and then they can always uncheck options or change a different vocabulary if that's not what they want. Ask the user questions they don't know the answer to.
So yeah, in terms of being able to change your mind after choosing something from the select list, it does already work that way. But I guess then you're suggesting maybe just for taxonomy references to find the first bundle that the field already exists on and copy configuration from there, and then let them change it if they want on the next screen?
I think so. I mean, I'm presuming that after the next screen after this is the one that would show them what vocabulary got auto-checked on their behalf. So they could look at that and be like, oh, that's
right,
not what I want.
That doesn't change.
Sorry?
Well, that's the way it currently works, and the patch doesn't change that. After you say on this screen that you want to reuse an existing field, you next go to the settings for that field.
Exactly. So then I think it's fine to just do this behind the scenes without asking them any question, because they'll be given an opportunity to review it after they click the submit button on that form that you just showed. So that would be my preference. I'm not a UX person or a designer though, so feel free to defer to others who are. But yeah, the idea of like adding the tags vocabulary to like 13 different content types and every single time having to check a fucking checkbox, that sounds really irritating and annoying. So +1 to fixing that. I just, we don't want to make the field UI any harder to use because it's already pretty bad. So we get a little cagey when, we're exposing new options under that UI.
And so do you think that you want to make taxonomy references a special case for this? Or would that same reasoning apply to other things? I mean, I came to this issue from paragraphs.
I mean, I don't know enough about what again, I'm not sure who +1 this feature and wants it in core and what the reasons for it are, but I would go back to the people who really want to see this in core and find out what their use cases are, because taxonomy is an obvious one that seems good to me. I think in general, probably, that when you say add an existing field, you mean with its existing configuration as well. That would be my guess.
Yeah, that's
okay,
that is like what's the use case for not having the existing configuration?
Yeah, I can't imagine a good use case for add an existing field, but blitz all of my settings and make me think about what they were again from scratch. That doesn't sound like, so yeah, it might be that what I just described is something you do for all the field types. I don't know enough about who's in favor of this to know what their use cases were. But the taxonomy one anyway sounds really no-brainer thing to do.
So where I first came upon this was from the paragraphs module, where they have a custom widget. And that custom widget does not get applied when you reuse a paragraphs field. So that's a real live use case where people really do care about it.
Yeah, so then in that case, would the same logic you were just talking about work, where it's like find the first instance of this field attached to a bundle and then duplicate the existing settings? Would that accomplish what you want?
I think so. And
maybe
again,
that's...
As I said a few minutes ago, I think it really is an edge case where you want to reuse a field, but you're changing it for every different bundle you're attaching it to. And most of the time, I would expect that that when you reuse a field, you're it doesn't matter which bundle you're taking it from.
Right. I would posit that is true. Yeah, so if the issue or a new issue or whatever starts going in the direction of when you add an existing field, copy over not the default, the configuration from the field that you're adding, I think that sounds great. And then there's no UX impact of that at all beyond like different options will be checked than before.
And how about adding a confirmation message when they get to the next screen, copying configuration from the so-and-so. Can't say bundle.
I wouldn't do a confirmation page, but you could maybe do like a Drupal set message at the top that informs them of that.
Yeah, I didn't say confirmation page, I said confirmation message, and I was thinking Drupal set message.
Okay, yep. Yeah.
So that when they get to the next screen,
you have to make a yes or no choice. So yep, that sounds fine. Opinions, though, go ahead and speak.
So yeah, that would be a pretty easy change to the patch, and it would make, I think, no changes to the user interface on this page.
And so what would this patch do then? So when you select an existing field and click next, what would happen?
So it would look for an existing bundle that already has the field attached and take the first one.
But like, yeah, take the first one. Oh, okay. Would be annoying, I guess. Could be.
I'm sorry?
Could be annoying for site builders to copy over settings from another bundle that they don't want.
Right. Well, I mean, we're guessing that that's an edge case, that if they want to reuse the settings, they're going to be pretty much the same for all bundles, and it won't make much difference. That's just a guess. On the other hand, the only way to avoid that is the cumbersome opt groups that we saw in the screenshot.
So I think if we cannot exactly tell which one is the edge case, whether they're not copying or they're copying, then we should put needs framework needs subsystem maintainer review on this, so we get the field maintainers if they watch for the tag, and then see what they think about it.
I don't know that we have a field UI subsystem maintainer, but if we do, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Or at least on the same page.
So that just, should I go out and nag them or just put an issue tag on it to try to attract their attention?
I'll put the issue tag on it, and you can feel free to make them a bit. I put a tag on it, then I had a short comment about this one.
I have it drafted now.
Okay. That's what I have down. I was just surprised.
Okay, I think I can work with that.
All right. In that case, and since we are way over time, we should stop the meeting. Thanks everyone for coming.
Thank you.
And looking forward to collecting a list of issues for next week. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Cheers, guys.